Ben Fagan here with another episode of Career Cash, the podcast. On this episode, I am joined by the Senior Manager of National and Strategic Accounts at Seabourn Cruise Line, Eva Damato. On this episode, Eva talks about transitioning jobs, learning from every experience you have, and where keeping an open mind can lead you. It's an awesome conversation. Let's get to it. Alrighty, well, I am super excited like I am just for about every show, and I say that every time, so you guys get the gist and get the idea now. So today I have Eva Damato. Thank you so much for coming on. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well, Ben. I'm doing well. It's South Florida. It's getting a little bit cooler where it's good. It's been a good day.
Beautiful. And speaking of the weather, I just came back from Asheville, North Carolina, where my parents are moving. And honestly, the past forever, it feels like now, they were like, oh man, it's 20 degrees cooler, 20 degrees cooler. I'm like, whatever. On the way up, like my car was still saying like 91, 85, 91. And then we finally get there and it was like 20 degrees cooler.
Really like 20 degrees cool.
I was like, wow, okay, the hype is real. So, but no, it's
that's awesome. That's a pretty popular area. Everybody's going over there.
Yeah, super nice. And they were going there. They're looking to retire and get the seasons, which, as beautiful as South Florida is, we don't necessarily get those.
We really don't.
Yeah.
And you know what? There's a lot of people down here. The Asheville sounds nice.
No, it's good. I'm excited for them and gives me a good place to go visit. So that'll be
totally.
So I like to kind of start, by sharing, have you share a little bit about what you do on a day-to-day basis to bring a little context to our conversation, and then we'll go from there. So and I know you had a recent job change, so can you kind of take us through what you do on a day-to-day basis, and we'll talk about how you ended up, where you are today right now.
Totally. Absolutely. So, yes, as you mentioned, I did have a recent job change. So I'm actually gonna position this by talking almost about both of them, because there's a lot that I've done in my past role that is transitioning into this new role. And then there's a lot of way new things that I still have yet to learn about. So when I think about what I do on a daily basis, my job, first of all, I work for Seabourn Cruise Line, which is a small ship luxury cruise line. This was a recent switch. I used to work for Discover the Palm Beaches, which was a destination marketing organization. So it was a county-run marketing organization that brings tourism to Palm Beach County. And at Seabourn, I'm working in a similar capacity. So I'm working with travel advisors and what we call the leisure sales team. We work with what's called the travel trade. So that means travel advisors, tour operators, really receptive tour operators, online travel agencies, anyone that is selling the tourism product on behalf of the consumer. So specifically, I hone into travel advisors. I did that in my past role, and I'm doing that in this role as well. And kind of on a day-to-day, we work on anything as far as the marketing agreements, as far as their contracts, and then really understanding the client, really understanding the partnership is what I'm trying to currently even get better at, because every partner works so differently. Sometimes they're really marketing focused, sometimes they're really education focused. So we can do anything from answer emails to go to a trade show and an event and kind of do presentations. We do sales missions, which typically in this role is kind of bringing your team, your sales team, what's called a BDM or a key account manager, which is someone that works kind of in the field. So they're on a day-to-day going into those offices, whereas you're kind of overseeing the overall account. So going with them to do calls in the offices. So for education, presentations, just having a lunch and having a conversation. And then things like webinars and things like fam trips or destination reviews, which you'll learn if you're not in the hospitality industry, you'll learn that that's bringing people to the product. So in my past, I brought people to the Palm Beaches, to Palm Beach County to experience the hotels, the attractions. And in this case, we bring them on the ships to experience some of the itineraries and some of what the ship has to offer. So that is what I'm doing on my day-to-day, just making sure those accounts are truly being recognized, being focused on, and then making sure ultimately those sales get increased, right? Because it's all a part of the production.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And what I love so much about doing the show is I get to talk with people who are in like so many different places in their careers and in so many different industries. And so I want to talk a little bit more, have you share a little bit more about what that job transition has been like, because before we started recording, you were singing the praises of both companies, and I think that's so awesome, because I think a lot of times when people transition jobs, it often has a bitter taste. That's the connotation out there. Oh, I didn't like my last job, so I wanted something new, and that's not always
Yeah.
the case. And so,
No.
kind of walk us through what that transition was like, for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So, um, I think it's sort of a funny transition from the beginning because I never went to school for hospitality. Obviously, Lynn University graduate for business admin, sales and marketing specialization on both ends, on my undergrad and on my master's degree. So with a minor in communication. So if anything, maybe like a PR background, right? Something like that. But my first job ever, which was probably one of the best decisions of my entire life, was to go work at the Breakers, which is a luxury resort here in Palm Beach County, located on Palm Beach Island. And from there, I learned more about tourism and hospitality in general, which then ultimately I wanted sales experience. So I went and transitioned to Discover the Palm Beaches, where I learned a ton about the foundation of how to work in that leisure sales industry. And then now looking at everything that I did, everything that I accomplished there, um, basically this opportunity came to me and it was something that I had been very interested in. The company Seabourn as a whole is a beautiful company. What they do for tourism and what they do for their guests is exactly aligns perfectly with what I love about tourism. So when this opportunity was brought to me, kind of never want to rule out an opportunity, and just thought this is a great way to even really increase my knowledge about the product and about leisure sales in general. So I think my transition has been, well, I know it's been positive, but I think it's been relatively easier than I think I thought, right? We always build everything up in our head and make it so nerve-wracking and you get so terrified. And believe me, I am terrified on a daily basis. I'm like, am I doing everything right? Am I making sure I'm dotting my I's and crossing my T's? But I think with some of the background knowledge that I had, this transition has been a bit just a little bit easier than I thought. And I really like it. But with that, I keep in mind that I'm learning something every day. So I'm trying not to get too down on myself when I don't know anything. And I've ultimately never been on the cruise side of the industry. So even that's a whole new experience. So the position is new, the cruise industry is new, but it's such an awesome company that I'm so happy that I was a given the opportunity, and then B, that I'm kind of using my experiences from before to now transition to this role. And I think it's ultimately helping me a lot.
That's so cool, and we could touch on so many different things here. So I'm pumped about this. But I want to take a small break and kind of dive into a little something that you mentioned, because I think, again, from the big picture, once it's all said and done, like that, whether it's the success, whether it's settling into the routine, it looks like, okay, that happened. It was easy peasy, no big deal. But like you mentioned, we build things up in our head, right? Make it more, bigger than it needs to be, less stressful. We, build the mountains out of molehills, everything like that.
Totally.
Worry about things that aren't even here yet. So, what was that for you, and how did you manage that and kind of get yourself back into, the groove, keeping things in perspective so you can do what you do best?
Wow, that's a really good question, right? That is different, I think, with every sort of situation. But ultimately, I have to remind myself that this is still all relatively new.
Mhm.
It's all a learning process. And then I think about, okay, well, this is XYZ situation has happened. Now, maybe it's something I have no experience with, but I've actually been able to compare it to past experiences, whether it was in the hotel world or whether it was in the destination marketing world. I've kind of dealt with something similar, maybe not as in detail or as in depth as what I'm dealing with in a certain situation and this new experience, but I kind of find similarities in where I said, okay, I dealt with that, and we grew from there, or we managed to fix it, create it, and make it and transform it, or I shouldn't say or. So I use that and then I apply it to kind of what I'm looking at now and seeing like, okay, are there similarities here? Well, have I actually already done this and I'm just going into panic? But I think using my past experiences just and the learning, of course, going forward is making everything easier. And that is not how you start out, right? Because when you start out, you don't really have anything to go off of. So everything's really new and hard. So just hang in there because you'll start to learn. And even in your first positions, you'll start to learn little kind of tricks of the trade almost like, oh yeah, I already had this situation come up like this. So maybe it's similar in the sense that we can do this. And a lot of it's trial and error, truly.
So can you think of, without putting you on the spot, think of, any examples where, whether it's recent or, in the past, or maybe something you're experiencing right now that you're like, hey, this is new, but I know I've been here before. And let me draw on that past experience.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a few instances. I think mainly there's a lot of new marketing techniques that I have not been exposed to because of the detail of them, I would say, because you're kind of selling the whole entire destination, right? So you don't have one product that you're selling. So I think in certain situations, the marketing is so much more detailed that I'm almost halfway there, but I need to think like, okay, I can't stop now because I have a product to sell, right? We have itineraries, we have the dining, it's not so much me just saying, hey, experience what we have, enjoy the destination. Now it's really dialing in more. So kind of learning what the important tools that I have in my tool belt are to use to make sure I'm dialing in more, and ultimately just learning that I can and have to and should dial in more. So like that would be one example. Just making sure guests are happy, right? If guests maybe didn't have an experience that they thought they were experiencing, how are we handling that? How am I handling that? What does that sound like? What does it look like? So going kind of back into that, but I've had experience, right? So I've had experience in that in the hotel industry. So it's pulling that part of my learning and my knowledge back out as well to see what are the best ways we can make this guest happy. What are okay, they're having a honeymoon. What are the best ways we can celebrate a honeymoon now? What do I have? So just, things that we've did in the past, even for events. Now we're looking at certain events moving forward for the season. And I'm like, well, there were certain things that worked really well in my past role. Could they work well for this role? Or does it not make sense? So a couple of those would be some experiences that I'm dealing with now that are ever changing.
Mm-hmm. And that's, we were talking about Rigo, who is episode 14. You want to go check out his episode, you can check that out. But
Rigo.
after listening to this episode first, because I know there's a lot more to come here. But yeah, because he's in the real estate industry, he's talking about the selling of things too. But one of the things that he brought up, and a big point that he wanted to hammer home, was his approach to drawing from so many different industries. And just because you're in real estate or just because you're in hospitality doesn't mean that's the only way to do it. You can learn something from, like you said, communication, within business, within hospitality. And so, that's so cool that, that's kind of what it sounds like you're doing there. Now, one of the things that I wanted to also touch on too was when you're going through this, and I imagine that's a rare instance where the guest is unhappy. Do you take that personally? Is that difficult for you not to take personally?
I think I'd be lying if I said that I don't take it personally. However, personally, I always want to make sure everything is like perfect. So although I'm not necessarily taking it personally, I do get a little bit more panicked in certain situations where I'm like, okay, let's like do whatever we can. What can we imagine that we can do? And then just making sure, it's something that makes sense for us to do, right? Sometimes there's miscommunication. So we just have to make sure that we're following the right protocols and all of our guests are getting the same benefits and same, great experiences. But yeah, definitely, certainly sometimes I'm like, oh no, what can we do?
And but besides sipping on your tea to calm you down in those situations where there it is, where you have that desire, and I believe that's what makes you great at the things that you do, to be perfect, and to have that within the industry. It just naturally yields towards things not being perfect. You have to, adapt. So how do you personally go about adapting when things aren't perfect, to make sure that you're still feeling good, and then again they're getting the best experience possible?
Yeah, I mean, I think this, without a doubt, goes for almost anything that happens in this industry, and I think many other industries. But you really can't adapt until you know what's going on and you have the knowledge and you understand. So listening is a huge tool because you'll see not only if it's a guest praise or issue, you'll see that listening always helps, right? Because when a guest likes something, they'll tell you too. They really will. um they say when you're in courses, they say you hear about that less. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. I feel like we hear a lot of great things on our end as well, but listening is what we need to use to make sure we adapt to, okay, this was something that was really well received, and this was something that was not well received, so let's go ahead and fix that. But we have to listen, and we need to make sure we're taking, like I said, the right kind of path to figuring out what is best case scenario for particular one-offs.
And this can be kind of on the personal side, is also like the business side too. How do you go about balancing the things that you do take into consideration and make changes on, and the things that you listen to because it's a part of the job and you kind of respectfully dismiss? How do you kind of walk that line, so you're doing your job still?
Yeah. Um, well, I think that when you kind of find where you want to be and where you should be, you find it and you're happy there because it's kind of based on a passion. You have a passion for it. So when you're looking at kind of making sure you can bring awareness to those things that need awareness, or you can make something better and maybe hone in on that a little harder when you need to. I think that's, I think that would be all about having passion for what you're doing. Not everything you're going to like sound the alarm on at all, but there are the reasonings even are, how I guess how that it's being portrayed, whether it really needs to be updated or fixed, or whether it's something that you do all the time and they just appreciated it. But I think there's a lot of passion behind wanting to fix something and wanting to create something and make it better. And no one's really doing that if they don't really care about the job, or if they don't really care about guests or experiences or destinations. I think that passion, and I'm not really 100% sure if that's a really great answer to this question, but I think that's why I want to go ahead and take those things and fix them.
Yeah, and I think you answered it perfectly, because in so many words, what you're getting at, what it sounds like you're getting at, is saying when you care about the things you do, when you're passionate, you care about it, and when you care about it,
Right.
you do a good job. And so then
It's
that,
almost kind of like second nature just to
yeah,
do it.
yeah, that makes total sense there. And I think
If there's a day that I'm letting things go to the wayside, because I just am like shrugging my shoulders, then I should probably find a new spot to be in.
definitely, and that's a good metric to kind of keep in mind as well. And thinking, kind of speaking on passion, what is it specifically about either luxury hospitality, luxury cruise business that gets Eva fired up, gets her going in the morning, ready to rock and roll? So what is it that really makes you gravitate towards this industry?
It's literally just kept spiraling. So first it started out as the just enjoying traveling myself. And I think that's how a lot of people get into the hospitality industry. First, it started out as just enjoying traveling myself. And when someone came to me and said, "Oh, you should apply at the Breakers," and I said, the breakers. I said, I'm not a hospitality student. Like I'm graduating not as hospitality and tourism. I'm not going to apply at a hotel. And they were like, yeah, but you love traveling. And I was like, okay, I don't really see it, but let me give it a try. And of course, I learned about the hotel before I did. And that was one of the best decisions ever, because then I learned about how different traveling can be, right? Traveling in a luxury kind of uh, classification is much different than traveling in kind of your mass market classification. And of course, just fell in love with kind of the luxury side of it and the service. It was the attention to detail, really. Everyone was friendly. And again, it felt like everyone wanted to be there and they were sharing the same passion. So I was surrounded by great people. And then it was just much more interesting because from a sales component, I learned so much about how a hotel works, the inner workings of things that you don't think about on, especially if you're not a hospitality major, you don't think about on the other end. So it started with that. And then after that, once I got my sales position at the Palm Beaches, I was able to go travel and meet so many other people that I felt like were so like-minded. And I think that that ultimately helped it take off as well. And now going back to it, so we went from a hotel, luxury hotel, to selling the destination, the Palm Beaches, which was a luxury, more or less destination, right? Palm Beach, Boca Raton, Delray. We have these beautiful areas where we live. And then moving into a luxury cruise line. Funny enough, I love this story, but the cruise line is designed by the same designer that designed the breakers. So
Hmm.
I was like, this is truly full circle
Okay.
for me. Like it just keeps spiraling, and everything, like the small details, they come up and they keep me inspired. And I really like the luxury segment of the industry personally, because I think that they really do a great job at finding destinations and understanding how we need to be sustainable in what we do in tourism. You know, the Breakers Hotel is extremely sustainable, one of the most, I think, in our country. Same with the ships. So just making sure we're not dropping a ton of people off in one destination, right? We're spreading it out. We're um, ultimately learning about the about the destination in a very, very safe way for the destination, for the guests. And I just really love everything that this industry entails. And from the details in the furnishings down to the people that I meet when I'm sitting there for 3, 4, 5 days away from my family, away from my friends. The people that I've met and I get to talk to and I get to work with and for are all just feel like family and friends. And I just, bringing the world to people is exciting. I like cultures. I like people. I like talking about what I learn.
Yeah, I mean,
That's
you
it.
can tell the passion is super contagious, and I mean that's why you do a great job at the things you do. So that's awesome, and so fun for me, to be around. And again, another reason why I love doing this. And as we're coming to the end, but not quite there yet. We've talked about your background just in schooling, not being in hospitality, and I mentioned a bit about what Rigo is getting at, learning from the different industries. What has your experience been like not being from the hospitality? Do you think it's given you an advantage? Was it a disadvantage at first that it's become an advantage? What has that been like for you not coming from a hospitality background in school?
Um, it's been fine. I think it's been fine. I don't think that there's really been any disadvantages or extreme advantages. I think that it's been a little bit of a give and take. Like I've been able to learn, and I started in the hospitality industry kind of younger, and at that was since that was my first job, that was really one of my first big career moves. That was really sort of my learning it. Like that was the start of it. So I guess I didn't spend a ton of time outside of the hospitality industry in my career starting off, but I just thinking about things that I learned in classes and what we did at Lynn, I think ultimately totally helped. It was a great experience because even though I wasn't in hospitality, there's still a lot of sales and marketing focuses that I focused on that I think sort of transitioned later. They didn't probably transition right away, but I think that they came in a little bit later, and helped me out maybe a little bit more in my second position, a little bit more. So I think being able to fall back on that background was very helpful. But I've also been able to learn a ton about something that I didn't really know much about.
No, I
So
love.
it didn't help or hurt. It was kind of like an extra tool in my pocket, if you will. I guess it helps then. An extra
Good.
tool.
Definitely, and the reason why I asked that is because I'm personally such a big believer in when you're going to school, study something that you enjoy and that will give you skills, whether that's an industry you necessarily want to go into. And I always
Yeah.
share that coming into school, no math, no science, hated that. Knew I generally wanted to be in the communication realm, and still didn't know exactly it. But I ended up taking like the survey class, where it's a little PR, a little journalism, a little this, a little that. And the Professor Stephanie Powers, she's like, hey, come take my journalism class. And yeah, she's amazing. And it's big hearts.
Yeah, you big arts.
And she's like, come take journalism one with me. I was like, okay, great. And I think naturally enjoyed, the writing and stuff, but that was something that I ended up doing, majored in journalism, but still throughout that. And, I know it kills her when I say this, never wanted to be a journalist, never wanted to work in media, but it was something that I enjoyed doing while I was in school. And I knew that it was giving me skills that I could apply wherever I go. Because the work that I do today,
Wherever.
yeah, is not necessarily journalism or communication, but it uses those skills. And I think that's the
It
most valuable thing.
it truly does. And I mean, even to the point of like writing a social media post for a partner, it's part of a marketing buy that we take out, but we might not necessarily send it over to social media if it's a one-off. So just being able to purely form like a really creative sentence off of creative writing courses that you've taken is very helpful. And it's something that I barely spend time in, but it stands out and it was different than how it was being written before. So it helps. It totally helps.
Just another tool in the tool belt.
Another tool in the toolbox. Just keep
Well,
collecting them.
you're also in the construction industry. Who knew that? Yeah, a lot of tools in the tool belt. That's the thing. So
Building something here. I don't know what it is.
exactly, that's part of the journey too. So as we are coming to the end of the show, I always say this is the bittersweet moment. Bitter because the show is ending, but so sweet because you got to leave us with one more valuable piece of advice as we're cashing out. So this is where you leave us with the most valuable tip to leave us with a little extra money on the road. So what do you have for us today?
It's a good one. There's quite a few there, but I think ultimately, just what I've learned at the base of everything probably that I've said today is just being open-minded, because you never know what can come your way, and you never know what saying yes to something can lead to, because we don't know everything. Like, especially when we're graduating, we don't know everything. And had I said no to applying at a hotel years ago, I don't know where I'd be now. Maybe, who knows? Could be great, could be not so great. But I know that I made that right decision. And it wasn't something that I really thought offhand that I needed or wanted. But it was the perfect decision for me. And I look back and I'm just keeping an open mind for me is huge.
I love that. It's simple, it's effective, and so powerful. And I know you got cruises today, you got spaceships tomorrow. Wherever you go, whatever industry you're in, I know you do a great job, and I can't.
That'd be really cool. Spaceships. Good,
Right,
good,
that's
good
what I'm
crews out there.
saying. Yes, but I know whatever you do, you'll do a great job, and I can't thank you enough for coming on today. So thank you again.
Awesome. Thank you, Ben. It was awesome to be here. Thanks for having me.